You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran, etc. This is not your average podcast show. This is a veteran podcast show that's focused on veteran culture and veteran readjustment culture. In this show, we look at the lives of veterans before they're in the military, while they're in the military, and after the military. These stages are important as far as looking at veteran lives, the daily lives, the experiences, the productions, the books, the magazines, the media attention that's tied to Vet World. Today, we're honored to have John Winn Bey, Force Recon Marine, who not only served in the Marine Corps in the Persian Gulf War, but returned to military to serve his country and became a Ranger School graduate, became a Ranger in his 40s. He also has been involved in numerous Hollywood productions that are credible. Why I say credible? Mark Barnett, Rudy Boesch, and others who are tied to the shows that John Winn Bey has been involved in. So I will not continue to give this long and extended introduction, but let the man himself give some words about his background at this time. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Mike, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about your life, because I think we're going to go throughout this episode and much like a pyramid to reach enlightenment, but to go through all the different stones, and so and the levels. So I mean, if you could briefly tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, in the beginning, there was John Winn Bey.
That's right.
I'm from Houston, Texas, originally. I've spent a large part of my adolescent years here in Houston. I was that typical sort of gung-ho kid that couldn't, basically stay in the seat long enough. I was very curious, so I've always been drawn to outdoors. Being that we're in Texas, we have nothing but woods, in the back. So essentially, as a kid, I was always, essentially drawn to the wilderness. So that was my beginning. I think that was the beginning of my journey onto the path of military. But before I did that, I was like, again, the most typical kid that was loved outdoors. I loved playing sports. I involved myself with track and field. Involved myself with typical football, because in Texas, everyone knows that football is number one, and it was then, and it still is now.
Well, let me interrupt you. What first of all, which track events were you in, so I can kind of like let the audience know a little bit about that, and then football. Which
Yeah.
position did you play?
Well, my first love is football. My position, at the time, I was a running back. I weighed about right about 185, 190. I was pretty fast in the 40-yard dash. So with my size, muscularity, and my speed, the coaches at Forest Recon High School suggested to me that my position would be better suited as a running back. So I said, sure, coach, whatever I could do to help the team win. So essentially I did that for a while, and it turns out that I was a pretty good running back. Although I didn't take the sport, I love the sport, but I didn't take it as an instrument or a vehicle to catapult me into university or college. But I just love the game, and I love having fun being out there with my other teammates and competing against the opposing team and see at the end of the day who would be victorious. And essentially at that time, I always had that opportunity. So I ran a lot of rushes. I made a lot of touchdowns. And once upon a time in high school, I was a pretty popular athlete. So typically with being an athlete in high school, you have all the fame and the glory. So I enjoyed a little bit of that. But along with that, when the football season ended, then we transitioned over into track and field. My actual specialized distance was the 400 meter and also the 200. Since I wasn't the fastest guy off the block when it came to the 100-yard dash, being again that I wasn't that small. I think guys in that position, they're average around 155 to maybe
Willie Gault.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, Ronaldo Nehemiah, and we saw what happened to him, right? Like, when he went. So, yeah. Well said.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and when I ran the 200, I was pretty successful. Although the 400 meter was probably one of the most challenging distances for a semi sprinter, because when you start off, you pace yourself, and you try to keep your muscles oxygenated, because in that back corner, that third turn, and then that fourth leading into the fourth turn to the finish line, that's what they call when the monkey jumps on your back. So, and that was always a struggle for me, because whenever I got around turn 3 and leading into turn 4, that monkey jumped on your back, and that remaining 110 yards that you had to transition to the finish line was always the most challenging one, not only for me, but for all the athletes. So, and I always thought that, man, if I could only lose a little bit more weight, maybe 10 pounds, but at that time it wasn't happening, because the football beats you up. You're benching 315 pounds. They want you to squat like 600 pounds, five reps. So they really want you to stay strong. But at the same time, we thought that sports, running track and field, worked on our stamina, endurance, and our muscle twitch, our red fiber, muscle. So that way, when we transitioned back into the next season into football, we would already have that endurance and stamina, and we will maintain it during the off season as well. So that was my stint for being in track and field and also football in high school.
Let me interrupt you here.
Go ahead.
Because this is you went very technical, and I want to bring this up to elite forces and your athleticism on these Hollywood top Hollywood productions. What do you think transferred from that experience? Like, for me, my wrestling just helped me keep myself out of a brig, you know what I mean? But like, what how did this transfer into bigger things? Because I noticed you being I was an Anglican Marine, and I was just like humbled, honestly humbled by your athleticism, and it wasn't just me. It was like other Marines and Army people, because I had met you at Army Jump School. You were and as we all know, um Army Jump School may be easier than other schools, but it's still a huge honor for a Marine to go through uh Army Jump School. And you did it like it was a cakewalk, And I was just wondering how you were able to bring that athleticism from your early years on to the Marine Corps and beyond.
Oh, hey, Mike, very good question. Well, one of the ways that I transition is, I think it starts up here in your mind. Largely, you have to have that can-do attitude, and I've um, always been that guy that lead from the front, and even while in high school, and also my short stint in college, I always just initially took things, took charge, and always wanted to create a standard for myself, and always wanted to be the best version of myself. And with that, even to this day, I always say, even to friends and family members, I say, hey, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, and you have to realize that you have to be the best version of yourself. So for me, as an adolescent, a young man, I typically always looked at myself and say, can you do more? Can I do more? And never sandbag on anything that I ever I tasked myself out to do. I've always wanted to be the best version of myself, so that transcended in my performance, being able to, outlast, outcompete, just be that first guy across the line, the finish line. And that was something that I think that was ingrained in me as a young kid, because I grew up with a family of Marines. Gung ho, hardcore, leather in the neck, 2 400 devil dogs that were grunts from the United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division. They were Vietnam veterans, and I always, when I was a kid, always took time out to be that kid standing around the corner and listen to the wise men speak. And I was always intrigued with their stories, which were very true. And I like, man, I could see myself being that person. And one thing that I always said, you can always push through when you think you've taken enough pain that you have to quit. That's where you go wrong. You can always push through the pain zone, or that threshold of pain. And then, and when you do, then you're finding anything beyond that, it's easy. So, and I think that's one of the things that with most people is that, how far are you willing to push yourself? Because if your mind is strong enough, your body will follow, and that's just the way it is. And
So here you are with all this ability, and people don't realize. I mean, you were on American Gladiators, so you had to have a gargantuan appearance, and you had that even in the Marine Corps.
right.
Now we're old men, we look great, but we've gone into the thin, after experiencing, I call it the John Winn. I used to call it the Winn effect, and you'll see pictures where I, like, when you first saw me, I was a PFC, and yeah, it was a great honor, and I you know, in Anglico, I was able to get my slot and stuff like that, but I was still kind of lanky, I didn't fill up and stuff like that. But you were one of the guys that kind of like influenced me. Like, I was saying, man, I want to at least get that way, and I ended up getting like you know, I've got pictures. I ended up having like an 18-inch neck. You know what I
Nice.
mean? I had
Nice.
like huge, Ronnie Coleman lats. I mean, traps. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I was able to really develop myself, develop my body, develop myself, develop my attitude, not just to be a Marine. And this is before the David Goggins books. And, like I said, even before I met Rudy, even though, Rudy, becomes kind of like the next person in my life, we had a brief, this is like a kind of John the Baptist Jesus moment, you and I, it's a brief passing, but it's very monumental. The guy from my childhood who's very similar to you and Rudy is a guy named Dale Bowen, who pretty much epitomizes everything that you just said about your life, and yet he's this Kentucky white boy, redneck, whose family adopted me into their family after my family abandoned me. Not again because of socioeconomic reasons, not because of love. And so that was a good thing that came out of it all. But and this isn't about me, but I point out my life because I want to say to everyone here, we all need not the heroes that are like on TV a million miles away or a million screens away. But, finding heroes, I think a gift that I have within me is that I could spot heroes, not talent, but people, high performers, and I capture things from them. And then I put them into my toolbox, and that's how I've become great, you know? And I would say you're one of them. And so I guess, to make a long story longer, I'm wanting to ask, how could you have all this athleticism, the charisma, the rank, the special operations, top tier Marine Corps and regular military kind of like positionality, and yet still be humble? It's not like you dogged me out or others out. Like, you had very positive words, and yet, you drove on with your purpose, which I took on as like my attitude, as far as like, you know, give the people what they want and then carry on. Um, but I just wanted to find out, why didn't you have like major attitude? Because, man, if I had all that at that young age, I mean, we were young. You
Right.
just showed a high level of maturity.
Thank you, Mike. Well, well, for me, like I said, I think it's all in how well my parents have essentially uh, planned out and reared us to be front runners, and and in my for my name Winn, you know there's a lot of history here in Americas concerning my family. So
Could you
we
share some of that? Because
sure.
I know a little bit about it, and then I also know, like, uh you know your family's close, and then there's great spirituality that you came from, even from before, like before you joined the Corps, and just all these like great things that I picked up from you when we were younger. I mean, we're talking about like kids that are like, I must have been 18, 19, and you were maybe, you know, 20, or, 21, 22, and yet there was such a high level of maturity. But could you tell us a little bit about that history? Because I'm also involved in narrative, and you have such a powerful narrative that I think our audience would love to know.
Yeah, sure, Mike. No problem. Like, for the Winn family, legacy is still here today. But I like to start, with it's actually started back in the 1790s. A
Oh,
lot of yeah. So 1790s for the Winn family here, tracking all the way from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. Were my ancestors were essentially a part of the development we were landowners who owned a lot of tracts, a lot of land along the East Coast. We also were involved in politics. So, and again, this is in the 1790s, and we were involved in starting, the church programs, that are still there today on the East Coast. So the politics we were heavily involved in. The Winds. My family started a school back east for as they classified it was Black/Indians. So we were, my lineage on both sides of my family are 100% confirmed that we're the copper tone, natives that were here, before, the 1492. So that's been confirmed. And so that's just something in the blood. And even here, when my grandfather moved from Louisiana, he was part Frenchman as well. Mm-hmm. So he brought along his craft, and he was one of the most successful businessmen in Houston, for a melanin-rich, complected person. So it was very normal for me as a son of a rich father and a rich grandfather here in Houston to run around in a two-story house wearing, black tie, or driving in my grandfather's vehicle, or my dad having all the Mustangs he wanted. So essentially, we were kind of a silver spoon in our mouths, privileged. But at the same time, with that gene that courses through that 23 chromosomes that I'm made of my father, as well as my grandmother, who was a very, very successful school teacher. We were very, very involved in the community. We provided, resources and employment to the local personnel, residents. We even built homes. My grandfather still has homes that he built that are still standing to this day in Houston. So yeah, it's exciting. It's a very powerful, and understanding that having that royal bloodline that's coursing through my veins as well, kind of helped me to be who I am today, and it helped me to transition through the challenges of my life, both past and present and into the future. So for me, going into the military, was a no-brainer, because my whole family was associated with the military at all capacities. So it was something easy. So when I joined, it was when I finished my first year in college, which at the time I majored in computer science, and so I was pretty good to developing the DOS systems to get the computer to do what you want it to do, and also mathematics. So I was pretty good at that. But there I had this small, still voice in my head, Mike, that just said, "Hey, you can do this. It's easy." But for some reason, everywhere I turned, the Marine Corps came rushing at me. And then I just said that, after finishing up the second semester of my, I said, "Hey, told the parents, I'm really, really getting this attraction to join the Marines." And my mom was like, "No, finish college, go in."
I'm gonna interrupt you here. I'm gonna be your agent, and I'm gonna craft the French Prince, the Fresh Prince of the Marine Corps of Bel Air in Houston, because you have the reversal of like David Goggins, who has all this tremendous adversity in the beginning, all throughout, socioeconomic, some very horrific stuff, and yet, not to minimize or to kind of like to show off your background, but you've got a different background, and yet you're still able to do. It's like you've got, like Marvin Hagler, the great boxer said, it's hard to go out and fight after you're sleeping in satin sheets,
Right.
and you were able, metaphorically, in the satin sheets of your family past and everything like that, your history, the comfort of your life to a certain extent, and to go into the Marine Corps and then to compete. And so here we
Mhm.
have Goggins here, and guys like Rudy and guys like myself, although I'm smoking and joking and getting into trouble and all that, but still looking good, but like not nearly as, I would say, as great as you guys. And I can say that in a very positive light, because we all have our gifts. And what I learned from you guys is that I could be great. I could take that attitude
Mhm.
into Nerdsville, and
Right.
go to all these Ivy League schools and be, you know, take that same attitude and perform and do it. Not that I didn't have that potential in the Marine Corps. It's just, I ended up going for commission. I ended up doing this. I ended up being dragged into other directions. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I picked up a lot from guys like you, from you specifically, and now being exposed to your family history, it is easy to connect the dots. And you were able to do it your way and go into this, savage system called the United States Marine Corps and become elite. And, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you say some stuff about that too. I mean, we'll come back to some of this other stuff, but I want to hear right now, like, here you are from the satin sheets. You end up doing well in college, but then something within says Marine Corps, and
Right.
you're in this savage system, old Corps, PX
Yeah.
Kelly's the commandant, Vietnam War, recon guy is the commandant of the Marine Corps,
Mhm.
and you're there, and you're kicking ass and taking names. So give a little bit on that.
All right. Well, yeah, sure, Mike. No problem. Like I said, once I finished up with my that period of my college career, I got the agreement after a while. My mother approved the thumbs up for that, and so I started the process to go to MEPS, and from there, um, it was pretty easy. But on to my first experience in the Marine Corps boot camp uh, was I noticed that other Marines that were coming in, it was a bit of a shock. But to me, it was like, okay, this is cool. Let's go.
Mm.
It wasn't. It was almost like, okay, I was bred to be a Marine.
Wow.
I always had that.
I'll attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
You could have. They could have made a GI Joe doll of you. Yeah, I
Yeah,
could see
yeah.
that.
Well, thanks, Mike. But for me, I had a mission. Like I said, once I finished up with that year of college, and a real quick story that happened to
Let's
me
go
while I
for it.
was in the student union, the student hall, studying for my finals. And it was that one evening about 7, 8 o'clock, or let's say military time, 19 or 2000 hours. On the far side of the table that I was sitting on, this long table, there was a magazine, and I will never forget this magazine. It was title of the magazine was Gung Ho, and I'm like, holy smokes! So once I took the break, I walked over to the other side of the table, which is about it seemed like 30 feet away, and I sat down in front of this magazine, and I'm looking at the cover, and it says Gong Ho. So then okay, I'm turning the pages, and I'm looking at all these stories about Navy SEAL stories, the cloak and dagger stuff about the CIA. Uh, you had the Green Beret stories, and I'm like, articles and all this stuff. These guys were like, and then I turned to the next page, and then there's something that said Recon Marine. and it said Force Recon Marine. I'm like, whoa, I never heard of that. So my dad's been in the Marine Corps, my uncle's been in the Marine Corps. You know, I'm like, everybody I know. And then I said, hey, man, what is it about this Force Recon? I asked my dad. He goes, oh, man. He goes, Force Recon in Vietnam, we were there. He goes, son, they were the cream of the crop, man. They were the best of the best. And he said, man, like, man, they were the best. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. So that's still a small voice in my head said, that's what I want to be. I'm going into the Marine Corps to become a reconnaissance Marine, a Force Reconnaissance Marine. And that was my mission, Mike. When I joined the Marine Corps, my whole mindset was specifically on joining recon, becoming a recon Marine. So when I went to boot camp, it was.
Let me interrupt you here, because people don't understand the context. And you know me, I'm a nerd and military history nerd and all that. So at this point, what year is this roughly?
This is 1986, late 1986, around November timeframe.
So people don't understand at this point. It's very natural for John to be thinking this way, because the last major war you have is Vietnam, and the toughest missions, no doubt, were and it's not to brag, it's not to show favoritism. I'm just, according to my readings in military history, the toughest special operations unit was Force Recon, because they're operating out of I Corps, right on the DMZ of North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and they're fighting not just like, rice paddy farmers, Viet Cong, untrained, villagers. They're fighting Chinese and Russian trained conventional troops. They're fighting real, I mean, not that the Viet Cong were not real, but they're fighting some real heavy hitters. And
Right.
and Marine Force Recon, does revolutionary things in regards to direct action as well as surveillance in military history, by just the way that they patrolled, just many different things. So much so, and I'm going to cut the story short, that the founder of SWAT, the whole concept of SWAT, was developed by a Force Recon Marine who basically uses the same tactical approaches, fighting in I Corps, and he takes that concept, without the politics, or with the politics, but we're just strictly looking at the military side of the house on this. This elite force called SWAT, and that ends up, becoming a worldwide kind of like concept. So here you are, you choose the best. The point that I'm making is that you choose the best of the best at that point. And there's no doubt now, everyone's, at the same level, pretty much. But back then there was just like this higher, because the Marine Corps has to do more with a lot less. And
Right.
the performance outcomes, if you look at the different battles and everything, you see Force Recon really stand out in Vietnam. And so Force Recon, the Navy SEALs were still kind of developing, really, I mean, as far as SEALs, I mean, there were frogmen before, but like, as far as like SEALs, that was something that comes up more like in the 60s, right? But
Right. Yeah. John Kennedy basically authorized them to form their portion of the SEALs program, and before they could do that, they had to basically talk to other special operations group like those in Force Recon and also SF, in order to get that foundation laid out so they can be able to be successful. So they're relatively the new guy at that time.
Right. And it's not to minimize their accomplishments, but the point that I'm making is you're going into the Marine Corps saying, I'm going Force Recon as some boot. You know what I mean?
Right.
And not only that,
true.
and I'm not going to play the race game or anything, but even Goggins talks about it, which, the way he says it, there's accuracy, but inaccuracies as far as like, well, and I've got a research study that can kind of prove it, that basically in special operations, it's not that special operations is racist, but you're not going to find a lot of minorities in special operations because they are insular, culturally insular. And so the point that I'm making is that you had to transcend many, many different things, to, again, show up as a Marine and say, hey, I'm going Force Recon when, this is a very exclusive club,
right?
Hardcore proven club, in the lines of the Green Berets and Rangers, at that level, with the same history, if not an older history. I mean, so go into some of that.
Well, yeah, for me, like I said, once I basically, I was a almost graduated guide from boot camp, but I had a little setback. And but anyway, once I moved to the transition to the next phase of my training, which is infantry training school up in Camp Pendleton, I think down the street from Camp Horno. That's where Recon indoctrination team came by, and they asked for volunteers, and I raised my hand and checked my ERB or service record book and found me good to go physically, mentally. So I had that opportunity. But then one of the things that I did notice while as a boot in the Marine Corps, that there is a very few melanin rich, or they call the Marine Corps term dark greens, that are in special operations, and I always thought about that, for briefly, because again, whenever I set my mind to do something, I really don't see color. All I do is see the color green, even though there's a light or dark green Marine or there's a light green Marine, doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, for me, while I was in the Marine Corps, it's all about performance. At the end of the day, it's the best man wins. Whoever performs the best is victorious, is the leader. So I've always taken that mindset to be the best version of myself. So I never really worried to focus on all the little things that you don't see with that kind of club. And I recognize that it does exist, but for me, it was always a one direction journey for me. And it was a path that I was on that I knew I had to get to my objective. So even though my peripherals, the things that are happening in the Marine Corps, even within the Force Recon, like, you had the little groups, and then you had the, I didn't pick, but most of us dark greens never paid attention to that stuff, because it wasn't what we were there for. I always thought that being a professional Marine, we always saw through to get the mission done and never allow myself to be occupied with the stuff on the side, although it wasn't perfect.
Right.
But I sure tried to make it that way, and by leading by example. And that's the thing. I always lived from the front, because I always wanted to recognize myself as being the best version of myself when I was given the opportunity to lead and when I was given the opportunity to perform. I always showcase that wherever I go, because when I went to jump school, same thing when we met up there, that was my mission, was always to get to the lead sleds, get to the school, get to the school, graduate from that school, get back to the company, and get another orders to get cut to go to Halo school, get done with Halo school, which was really, really, it was interesting. And just go back to school.
Say a couple of things about Halo school, because a lot of people may know about jump school, but they may not know about Halo and the distinctions, because it's great to have jump wings, but to have Halo, it's a different type of, it's a whole nother skill set.
Yeah, it's definitely advanced jumpers program that I went to at the time. It was located in Fort Bragg, essentially right down the street from CAG, or Delta Force compound. So a lot of the guys that were in military free fall, MFF, our Halo, high altitude, low opening, or HAHO, high altitude, high altitude, high opening.
Yeah.
You jump with the mask on. Beyond 20,000 feet, you need an oxygen and a tank. So essentially, on a tank and a mask, that's pretty consistent with that of a jet fighter pilot. And then we just jump out into the darkness. But while I was there at military free fall at Fort Bragg, I got teamed up with a couple of SF guys, long tabbers, and my buddy was a long tabber E7. And again, I was an E3. I was a Lance Corporal. I was a Marine Corps Lance Corporal, E3, jumping military free fall. My jump buddies were SF guys, or E7s or E8s. And I made it through, bro. Whereas they did not, I did, because it was something that I will never forget. Jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, the first attempt, and you don't know what to expect. You just jump out, follow the instructions, and just follow your instructor instructions. Do the best you can, hard arch, flat stable, have that spatial awareness, and just fall flat and stable, and just maintain control. Control once you get on the canopy, maintain canopy integrity. So after my first day, we jumped 4 times that day. After my first experience jumping out of a C-130. I was like, holy crap, we get back on the ground. We're packing our own chutes, bro. We were packing our own 7-cell Ram Airs. And you have to pack, because if you don't pack it right, you can cause a catastrophic incident that you could not walk away from. So it was a very, very...
So you don't have a fat body rigger by you doing it for you with his Shamrock Shake, and
no,
you're doing it
ourselves.
You're packing it yourself.
DIY. Do it yourself, brother. You pack your own chute, and they sign off on it, and you just get back on the truck, go back to the tarmac, jump on I think it was a C-130 at the time, and get back up to the elevator, jump right back out, and just practice some maneuvers that you were taught, and you get through that day. But like I said, when I had the SF buddy, he quit after the second jump. He came out so bad. He came out in a complete head facing the ground. It was a complete vertical position, falling on like a corkscrew.
Wow! And
he couldn't break out of it, man. I was flat and stable, and I could see him, and I'm like, dude, flat and stable, pull hard arch. And that dude, man, he turned hard arch, and he turned upside down. His back was facing the ground. He was looking up at the sky, and I was looking down at him, and I'm like, holy smokes! And everything's like in a few seconds. So when at the last moment where he got around about to pull altitude, his IR is a device that actually pulls for us if we don't pull our main rip card. So he finally got stable enough to pull flat and stable just enough, but he was really just going and to the left, just out of control, but just enough where his parachute could actually spring out.
I don't want any of that. You can have all
air. And man, he gets on the ground. Long story short, Mike, he gets on the ground, and I said, "Buddy, you okay? You okay? You okay?" In the packing area, he goes, "No, man, I'm done." And this is an E7 Green Beret rolling cover. He almost burnt in, dude. I was like, "Holy smokes!" So that was my moment that I realized the danger of this profession and it's always been that way in special operations communities. These guys are flying on the very edge of freaking life and death every time, and especially First Force Recon. especially during that time when I was there, everything they did was all just on the lines of life and death. In training, we always said, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. I will never forget that, man. And that's so true. I spent 8 years in that unit, or close to 8 years, and it was balls to the walls every time. And I'm like smoking every time, dude. But I loved it. I enjoyed every bit of it. Met some really, really good friends to this day.
Well, it says a lot about you in that, you know, they kept you, you know, in the Marine Corps. They really want good talent to spread to leg units, you know, regular, you know, grunt units, but they kept you so that, you know, you would be with the high level of professionalism there, you know, for all that period. That's, you know, you didn't have to go out into just the regular leg unit out there. But so then we have you doing all of this stuff, and then, you know, what intrigued me, and I think, you know, our audience might be curious about the Persian Gulf War. We have the Persian Gulf War happening, and you know, certain people, they're noticing the CNN and all of that, you know, all that bombing and everything, but there's other stuff happening. And then I'm noticing something. I don't know how I came across it, but you know, these dune buggies, you know, in the middle of the desert. And then I'm also reading about stuff that most people don't understand, and that is, you know, actual combat with this highly advanced military, the Iraqi army and the Republican Guard. And you were in the middle of that type of history, and I was just wondering if you can say some things about that.
Okay, yeah, Mike, I can. It's been quite a few years, so I'm sure it should be declassified. But yes, I did. Was with a team, a Force Recon team that was dispatched to doing Desert Shield, Desert Storm to try to mitigate the Saddam Hussein's push. And well, you know, attempt to hold on to Kuwait, you know, because of the value or resources that were offered there. So, but we at that time, First Force Recon introduced a new high-speed light strike vehicle that was essentially a super souped-up dune buggy that could go 100 miles an hour. With three personnel, flat out, can negotiate various terrains, whether it be rocky or deep sand areas, which, you know, that was pretty much the case in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So we were dispatched after they completed I think it was 30 days or so bombing that they were doing. During that time, we were in Saudi Arabia, you know, going through our checks, you know, get everything, going through our rehearsals, going through our weapons checks, doing the things that we do. The more we train in peace, the less we bleed in war. And we were pretty stoked about getting the word that we would be going into parts of Kuwait, if not along the outskirts of Iraq. Now, I don't want to go any further than that, but I can say for certain that while my experiences with my strike vehicle, we primary missions were to basically locate and call in fast movers on targets in our AO, and also to identify AAA sites that we would again call in, you know, heads up, give a 10-digit grid approximately of that location, and then have high bombers do their job. And at the same time, our secondary mission was to stand by for pilot recovery. So we were essentially in the AO, enemy held territory, just on standby for the purpose of retrieving some of our airmen, you know, fast movers that may have got shot down. And again, we were also there to identify Scud launch sites, which we did see them launch, and we did report them before to hire. Unfortunately, a few got through, and unfortunately, some of our soldiers have lost their life. But again, we were looking to identify and destroy those Scud sites, and that, in fact, that was our primary mission. But during that time, Mike, we implemented a new system called the continuous wave system, and also the GPS. Now, during Desert Storm, I was the primary operator, radio operator, the primary communicator. So I had to do both continuous wave and also SATCOM uplink. So we employed new systems and wrote a whole desert manual based on our experiences with the light strike vehicle, which is a dune buggy they call light strike vehicle. I think today they call them various different names, but the system we had employed during that time was not well known to the friendlies and as well to the enemy, because we had an incident that took place to where we were cruising along the desert like we did, like in an inverted D, light strike on my left, light strike vehicle on my right. We're pinpointing the direction of march, and so just so happened we ran into a trench line that appeared to have stretched miles in both directions, and noticeably we started to bring our vehicles down to a slow rate of speed, and then at times we had our binoculars, we were scanning our sectors of fire, and we identified a Republican Guard unit at our 12 o'clock position. They came out of the desert. That's all I could say. Hundreds of them, and they were not POWs. They had AK-47s. We ran right smack into the Republican Guard, a unit, and broad daylight. And Mike, we made it back, man. And luckily for us, that these guys saw us, didn't know who we were 100%. They showed up. We identified a person before we were about to break contact. And when we do our drills, we break contact by saying, we make contact. It's a drill. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. So as we were about to initiate breaking contact, which does require us to utilize our cruiser weapon systems to break contact, at that very fraction of a second before we engaged that unit, that Republican Guard unit, they brought up a white flag. They started waving a white flag in front of us, and just so happened to be my team leader identified that, and he told us to hold fire, hold fire, hold fire. It would have been a sight to see if we would have had to engage those guys with 50 cal rounds, man, because there was 3 vehicles, and we interlocking sectors of fire with. I had a whole bucket on my whole ammunition of I had like 7,000 50 cal rounds, and I selected all tracer tip rounds, and I belted them all together. And my first 100 rounds of 50 cal were straight tracer tip, and that broke tracer tip that broke on when they go down range, they make a statement, bro. And I tell you what, we said, okay, we didn't light them up, but we did identify. We broke contact, and we got as far away as we could to a clear overwatch position, and we called it to hire and said, hey, we have these Republican Guard units that are trying to surrender to us. So we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So they said, continue with mission. So we identified their location via 10-digit grid, and we kept pushing along the lines, and where we kept seeing a bunch of them come out of the ground. And luckily for us, that's where the PSYOPs department of the military actually did a great job by sending those flyers out to those guys, and they read it in their native tongue, and then they were willing to give up, because we broke the supply line. Once we severed the supply line, they were unable to get the water, the food. So luckily for us, we didn't have a shit show or a massacre for us, because I think if we'd have drove up there my body will not, our bodies will not be here today. And I'm 100% sure of that, because if we had made contact with that many Republican guards, being that we're in a light strike vehicle, and we had a decent amount of armament, AT-4s, 50 cals, M60s, but we minus the armor. We were only for speed, and we use our speed, and also as our armor, if that makes sense, any sense. So yeah, we were lucky to be alive, bro. That was wake up call, because it was broad daylight. I didn't see them until we were right up on them within about 100 to 200 yards out. You know, so then I'm, wow, dude, that was crazy. That was close.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that just shows you that the Persian Gulf War wasn't just the CNN kind of like air war that we saw, and you know, just a lot of the politics featured on in the media.
Yeah.
So I can truly appreciate that, and others could appreciate that narrative. And yeah, and then it's interesting because later on in the War on Terror, much like you, I end up going back into the military, but I aged out, and I also didn't, I didn't really want to be an officer again. I had my other rank in my hybrid position in federal government equivalent. I was an eternal captain, at that point. But yeah, I didn't mind going back in, whatever, and pick up my enlisted rank, and then just by that, like, what, you go back into the military, I go back into the military, and what is that like?
Oh, my. I mean, my experience of transitioning from the Marine Corps over to the United States Army was exciting at first, but I would say very different, a very different experience. Marines are a breed of their own, man. There's only one way, a true Marine. Going into the Army for me was exciting, to the point because I knew there were some things about the Army that I was curious about. Of course, I will always know that being a Marine it is my dream come true. But for me, I sort of wanted something to do a little bit different. Maybe I can help in other places, because I know, for me, being in the Marine Corps, the only place that I would find that was comfortable for me was be back in a Force Recon unit. And unfortunately, at that time, I was about 40. I was coming up on 40. And I don't think the age extension, they put an age extension. So essentially my 8 years, and subtracted that from about 39, 40. So that essentially put me in eligible to continue to serve again. I was excited about serving, and I wanted to bring some of the skill sets that I learned from Force Recon, learned from the Marine Corps, over to a combat element in the infantry in the Army. So I felt that maybe some of my experiences, my training, could help them. In fact, turns out that it was I was tapped into, my experience was tapped into by the brigade commander, as well as by the battalion commanders, because my weapon skill sets that I was able, 50 cal was one of my, Marine Corps, we're taught everything. Every crew serve system, we can break it apart, blindfolded, we can assemble it, disassemble it, function check, the whole 9 yards. And so I thought that I could be helpful in that respect. But at the same time, knowing that the traditions and customs of the Army were not quite the same as the Marine Corps. So that was a little bit of a challenge for me, which I was able to adapt to, well enough.
Yes.
Because I never relinquished being a Marine. So that was always a challenge for me in meeting other NCOs, my peers, and any of our officers, because there was always stigma about being a Marine in the Army, because a lot of them, unfortunately, I guess were kind of threatened by the fact that we were Marines and wanted to curious about why we were in the Army. Because I wasn't the only one that crossed over to that,
Right.
to do that. But with the amount of
Yeah.
decorations we are, it's just they've never seen anything like us.
Like that. Yeah.
It's like, you know,
especially someone like you know, who brings, you know, all of that. And not only that, you've got a lot of experience
right.
operating in Army schools
Yes.
that you graduated from, that you excelled at a high level 15
Yeah.
years, 20 years before these guys who are, you know, first sergeants, company commanders, you know, majors and all that, lieutenant colonels and
Right.
all that. So you've got, you know, they were like at West Point or some, you know, NCO school when you were already like doing, you know, advanced patrols and all that. You were already a hardened combat
Yeah.
vet
Yeah.
for sure, and saw real conventional force
Yeah.
warfare.
Yeah.
So
Honestly, for me,
yeah.
it was, Mike, it was really, like I said, it was really intriguing, exciting, and really easy for me to cross over the Army because, again, I mean, I've been an advanced operator, unconventional warfighting practitioner, and serving in one of the most elite units in the entire all Department of Defense, if not the world. You know, you just you get it. It's sort of like you just get a head start. You're like a rock star, if you will. You know, I did feel like a rock star because my other, you know, subordinates, they were all like, you know, Sergeant Winn, he's the best. And you know, it was like, hey, dude, just chill, man. We're all fighters. We're all here. We're gonna get you through this. And I felt an obligation to serve in the Army to teach young warfighting practitioners to how to get through it, and it really transcended my belief and understanding of faith. With, you know, taking these guys overseas in Iraq, and my whole squad came back every time, you know. And yeah, we did some pretty interesting. You know, I nearly stepped on an IED, surface laid improvised device. It didn't detonate. You know, I'm still here. So I took point because one of my soldiers just wasn't really focused enough to attention to detail. And, you know, we had a long day, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take point. And even though I'm the squad leader, I'll take point. I took point and ran right into a surface laid IED, a hasty laid IED along the linear danger area, because they were lighting our fob up pretty good with mortar fire. It was pretty constant every day. So the leadership said, hey man, we need to push units out, and start patrolling through day and night. So my unit, we just pretty much patrol at night. And so the, you know, the battalion commander, the company commander said, hey, you know, we need to call Winn up. So every time we went down range to Iraq, Afghanistan, hey, call Winn up. And I'm like, wait a minute, guy, why are you calling me up? I mean, you know, you were a Force Recon Marine. Like, yeah, but that was like years ago. But well, it doesn't matter. We need you to help us out here. You good? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I guess I'm good. I do it. So that was a distinction. I saw a lot of times I was always in very, very different places where I was always getting these special assignments to other branches of the military while I was in the combat zone, like in Iraq. When I was in the Iraqi Army, I was serving with the United States Marine Corps. Wow. You know, for a very short period of time, but I was serving with other Marines. And you were in the Marine Corps? Yeah, I was a Force Recon. Oh, hell yeah, man. And sitting there, I bunked with one of the captains, you know, one of the, I can't remember what the team was called, but we were at one of the palaces. So there, every time it seemed like there was a deployment, I always got called up by either the battalion, the brigade commander to do, you know, PSD training, or not training, but PSD work for protecting the mayor of Mosul and the governor of Mosul. So I was dispatched for like 6 months in Iraq.
And that was hot. That area is always hot. Mosul's always hot.
Oh my God, dude! They tried to kill us so many times. I mean, like literally, we had VBITs being detonated within view for our location. We had
those are vehicle so that our audience
Yeah.
knows, right? The vehicle.
Vehicle,
I
what is it? Vehicle borne,
I can't say it, but it's the
improvised
vehicles
explosive
with the
device.
people with the bombs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Yeah,
we had
they're
that, and it was like it was literally like the Wild Wild West for me. And
yeah.
so whenever even when I was in the Army, I've always got special assignments. Doesn't matter. It was always, I don't know where they get the intel from, but the brigade commander, the battalion commander always knew my skill set. And whenever I was needed, which I had no problem serving anywhere, in the AO, I had no problem doing it. But it was a lot of wow, it was a lot, man. I'm like, Jesus Christ, am I ever going to get a break? Because I was back to back to back to back.
Right. So let me go into this that's quite interesting before we go into the next pyramid ascent, and that's looking at the situation where I don't sleep much as you and others, but I mean you could see it on me. But the thing is that I stay up late and I watch, National Geographic. That's like my heroin, my TV heroin, at night, watching TV, National Geographic. In particular, I gotta watch National Geographic. I watch all the drug show, the cartel shows. They do it all. Dolphins, I don't care,
Mhm.
penguins. I'll watch all the National Geographic shows. I'll stay up all night and with you know fat body cookies, and then I'll go for a run, the next day to make up for that addiction. But
Right.
next thing you know, I don't know, it's like 3:30 in the morning, and I'm watching it, and there's something on, because in the past, right, Discovery Channel started that whole thing with reality and covering military elite schools, class 2,
Right.
3, 4, the SEALs, Discovery Channel, right? So those, even to this day, those guys, from that show. And so National Geographic did that with, all the elite schools, and they did something on Ranger School.
Mhm.
And I saw your picture or heard your voice or something. I was like, dude, this guy, I don't know. It's not some type of amorous thing, but keep running into this guy, like in different ways, not in person, but in different ways. And so Ranger School. So before we get into the show, like, it's a huge testament for the Army, because they are, they may not have the traditions like the Marine Corps because they're a lot bigger, but for them to send someone to Ranger School, you've got to really be squared away, from get-go, from Jump Street, just to get a packet through. Someone, one of my best friends from the National Guard, we went to Norwich Military College together. I don't know, he just retired, uh colonel. He was like the head dude for billets and stuff for Texas National Guard. August, I forgot, Colonel August. He went by Buhollis, but then he went through his other parents' name. But
Mhm.
they only put, your packet has to, kind of walk on water before they really send you to Ranger School. So can you explain that? Because you end up in Ranger School not as like some 22-year-old guy, but you know, someone a lot older, and you're going
Right.
through Ranger School. So what can you give us a little bit of the story regarding Ranger School?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Mike. Yeah. Well, after my second deployment in Iraq, while I was in the Army, there was an opportunity back the military installation here in Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. That there were we had a very famous ranger from the regiment, Command Sergeant Major, very, very famous Command Sergeant Major that was serving in our unit at battalion, Command Sergeant Major. Somehow had the first Third Corps, I think it was, agreed to start a pre-ranger course, a PRC course there. So, and the PRC course was run by other regimental rangers that were, you know, part of the regiment. Now they're E7s, E8s. So they wanted to basically run a pilot system to see if they were able to. I think at that time, the Ranger Regiment was experiencing a shortage because these guys were deploying every 6 months, and the turnover rate was freaking high. So I think they devised a plan to see if we could pull some you know, resources, some energies from the conventional units, infantry units in Fort Hood. So anyway, long story short, they started a pre-ranger course. We had about 150 that actually volunteered for the course. By the first day, we went from 150 down to 75 because they were really. You had to do the 5-mile course, and you're running uphill. You have to do the Army's version, the Army APFT, Army's physical fitness test. On top of that, you have to run that portion. We had to run the 5-mile, and then you had to do some other, you know, exercises that was nonstop. And this was during the winter, so you know the attrition was very tough. You know, you have the environment, the cold weather, the 100%, nearly 100% exertion, pushing your body and mind through the nearly max out. Ended up with about 75 of us that made the cut for the first day. And then we started the training. After we completed the PRC, I think it was about 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. We ended up with about 12.
Well, let me just let the audience know, and you could fill in the gaps here. This is almost abnormal because usually they take you know, a lot of time, you know, in the regular process, a slower process to go through their kind of indoctrination. You know, it's not as intense, and they have, like, you know, younger guys, and they get coached on, you know, a lot of stuff, and they're given a lot of room, you know, so that they can be better, so that they can, you know, complete the course and stuff like that. Because that system, from what I heard, you know, and you know, this is just like from the Rangers I know, that it helped them a lot, and it wasn't meant for like attrition, like the course that this experimental course that you're going through. I mean, there's a attrition going on, but not as intense as what you're going through. And it's you know, it's rough. And so this, can you say more about the course, and then about the Ranger School, because I just had to add that so that people understand.
Right.
This isn't just like, you know, hey, you're just going to get your tab and that's it. You know what I mean? Like,
no, it wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
But you know,
just before going through the gauntlet of getting the tab prior to it.
Yeah. They definitely kept the standards high, and you know, because I think that the Fort Hood command wanted to make a good impression.
Yeah.
Because they you know, you're talking about the quotas about 100. What I understand, the quotas to get one ranger to go to ranger school is like $100,000. And the quota was actually they you know you know, paid for the quotas, and they needed to fill the bill. They had available slots. Corps received about 20, but we end up only able to fill 12 because the Ranger Regiment, you know, guys, trainers weren't going to send no weak, you know, and questionable performers down to Ranger School, because they were trying to make this program successful for the future. And unfortunately, when we did end up having only 12 that were, and I was one of the 12 that was selected to go to Ranger School before bidding the first phase of Ranger School, we had that 1 week, which is the first week of Ranger School, is called the weed out week. At least that's what I call it. It's a weed out week. So again, you're going through various activities. And, you know, when I first reported to the first day I reported to Ranger School, my number was November 427. I was in SEAL. and the company that I think it was either with Bravo or Charlie Company, but either way, I wasn't at that time. I was unaware that they had an old Ranger or the young Ranger thing. So you're pretty much put on the spot as soon as you put your boots on the ground. So I got my call to lead initially the first day, and I was pretty much given 60 seconds to form up a whole company. I was just a gaggle of dudes, from all over the world. I was very impressed, by the way, with the collection of Ranger students from West Point, particularly. There were also a great deal of, West Point, the officers were there. We had a huge influence on officers from around the world that were attending Ranger School. Now, that's one part I was not familiar with before going to Ranger School. So I understood that how significant that Ranger School plays as being it's the premier international leadership school for commanders, and roll that over to the NCOs too. So you're either way, you got to be a freaking AJ squared away, high speed, max out to you, blacked out kind of guy. And that's what they wanted. So the first day I got my call to lead, and I essentially formed the whole company up and got in 60 seconds and got the right head count in 60 seconds. And I think I give a shout out to my West Point grads. They were eager to assist, to show their stuff. So I just did it like I would do at Force Recon, and we made it happen. And this is the thing. It's a go. It's a max out effort that you got to keep doing, keep exerting in order to get to the next phase. And I was able to push it through, being the oldest Marine in the class. So I wasn't aware that there was such a thing as oldest Marine. So once you're the oldest guy, you got to step up and take charge. And I think I did a pretty good job by leading from that point on all the way through the course. So it was a great experience.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So you're in Ranger School. You're right about that leadership course. Even in the first apprentice, and this isn't getting political, but the first winner of the apprentice was a Ranger School graduate, and he does, like on the show, talk about the leadership, the school, that it's set up, to be highest level type of leadership that you're gonna experience in the world.
Right.
And so you're going through all this. How would you compare? And this is just an interesting thing, again, in my study of culture, and sharing this cross-cultural analysis. What would you say the culture of Ranger School compared to the culture of reconnaissance school, as far as like the different skill sets, and just being as objective as possible? Can you give some some feedback to what I just said?
Yes, Mike, I certainly can. I would do my best to say that. Okay. Now, my comparison to Force Recon and Rangers, Ranger School particularly, are, let's say, ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School, and also Ranger School. Well, it's a significant difference, because the thing that stands out about the Marine Corps Amphibious Reconnaissance Schools, become a reconnaissance Marine, is a key element, and that is the neutralizer, and that is water. As a Marine, reconnaissance Marine, you not only are you going to master the land, but you also have to master yourself and that water, the amphibious activities, because what you do on land, because you utilize a whole different muscle group, and some things you're strong at, some things you may be weak at, but the neutralizer is always in water. So the difference between, I've seen guys, man, that water transition to water activity, it's a whole nother muscle group. You gotta just be able to transition really quickly mentally.
And to function and mental and all that. Right?
It's totally different. It's a whole different environment, so, you know, but that's the missing element that the Rangers do not have. They hit on a little bit of water activity, but nowhere near, God knows, nowhere near amphibious recon. There is absolutely no way. I mean, you know, the difference with me swimming 3 miles in the ocean, or even more than that, in full combat equipment with the ruck pulling in tow, and having to worry about the hazardous marine life, you know, in the darkness, which is what we do. And the Rangers, you know, the fact that they're not as water experts as the Marines recon is, that kind of draws the Marines a little bit further into their own elite status. But I can say, compared to the ground, on the boots on the ground activity, I would definitely say the Rangers have a very, very outstanding patrolling capability, navigation, communication. You know, they are very good at what they do, and I give them the utmost respect. But with the different types of missions, whereas they're designed to take airfields, or designed to raid, whereas the Force Recon,
traditional commando roles, but the way I get it, Force Recon, you're doing you're doing commando roles, and you're doing maritime commando roles as well on top of that.
Yeah, and the thing about this is, if you ever check that list of things that the I call it the list of not duties or qualifications, but our capabilities that we have, it's a very long list. And in fact, that list is incomplete. I say it again, that list is incomplete, because there's other avenues that the Force Recon it goes into that no one is aware of that. And I can't tell you what they are, but I can say this for a fact, that MARSOC, even today, has that role. It's not going to be talked about, but they have it play a very significant role, that when you go through that door, it locks behind you. And I know that unit, Force Recon particularly, was a sought after unit, that we did a lot of interesting things that are, let's say, that doesn't fall within the traditions of the unit.
Oh, don't get Roswell on me, because I get it. No, I get it, because this one guy.
No kidding, brother.
No, I'm not doubting you, and I can verify what you say with what this one dude. Man, he was part of the New York Four Horsemen. Nate Smith. You know, Utah, beautiful guy, man. He and his brother were Recon Marines, and they I think they were Force, and they were part of that interesting unit called Orange, you know, with the Dolphins in Basra and CIA and all these things that I didn't even know about when Nate just said some. Again, this isn't classified, but just like what you're saying, I guess I bring up the story to validate what you're saying, that there are certain things and activities that Recon and Force Recon they're involved in, that just most people will never know. And that's all that can be said, including from what I heard, even snipers as well, Marine snipers, you know, to a certain extent, you know. But to what you're saying with Force Recon, that's something. So that being said, how did you end up getting how did I end up capturing you on that National Geographic show? What was that all about? They were filming and you end up on that show.
Oh yeah. So
Did you even know that the cameras were rolling, or was it that I told you about it, or what? Because I
um, yeah, well, yeah, we knew, we were aware during the training. Like I said, we were in the first week of the assessment week of Ranger School, and we did hear a little scuttlebutt about Discovery, or a filming crew that would be there. So we could see that they were setting up, they were actually filming, but we really couldn't tell who they were filming. Although that day, for me, I was actually the platoon leader. I was responsible as my position at the time was the acting platoon leader or platoon sergeant for the platoon leader for the for my company, or that platoon, and well, no, for the company. So I was negotiating, getting them from the company, maneuvering them by foot to the training area, and that's where we could see the camera set up on the side, but out and away from us while we were conducting our training, and while we were waiting to go to the next assessment part of our training. So with my experience being in front of a camera, it didn't really bother me while we were training, because I know that it's just one other element that the leadership is doing. And but for what my mission was, is to try to make it through Ranger School. So right. My intent was to focus on getting to Ranger School, making myself lead from the front and be flawless while I'm leading, when it's my opportunity to lead. And because the RIs, Ranger instructors, they were pretty intense from time to time where you weren't getting it right. So
yeah,
I always
because because, and I can only imagine, in the sense that, with reconnaissance, or with Navy, with BUDS and all these other courses, you're getting graded at Ranger School. A colonel could be a top guy that they're grooming to be general, is going through that course. The best and the brightest are being groomed at Ranger School and being evaluated, and you're in that, whereas, it may be technically, in regards to reconnaissance school, maybe more skill sets and everything, and more and leadership in a different kind of way. Here, you're also being, you're gonna be preparing to possibly be sergeant major, or a general. You know what I mean? So
right.
it's just different. And so I guess, I get what you're saying. You weren't focusing on the cameras. You're focusing on staying focused, because you've got peer reviews, right? You've got,
Oh, yeah.
It's a very, technical, like you said. Those Rangers have such a huge pride, and I get it. They're badass.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it was, like I said, it just takes a little, whenever you're there and you have that pressure and to perform, and you're, because, all the eyes are on you, the cameras are on you, and, you're trying to take things in stride and keep yourself composed and just focus on the finite details and just get it right. And for me, it's like, okay, I always find myself, and this is, again, me, that small voice in my head speaking to my, I can hear, encouraging myself, people that, hey, you know what, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I'm going to focus on getting it done, and I'm going to get it done well. And that was the thing that I always focus on in Ranger School, because this is the thing. Our eyes are watching you very closely. And if you don't do something right, you get gigged for it, and you could get tossed out of Ranger School, which is what happened. We started off with 400, I think it was about 406 Rangers that went out there. But I guarantee by the time we finished, at least for my class, only 60 graduated. Oh. And in fact, the group we from Fort Hood, the 12 of us that were there, I want to say only 3 of us got our Ranger tabs. Wow. And the 2 that did receive the Ranger tab, it was not their first time in Ranger School. Now, for me, I was a first time in, first time out guy. Okay, and I was in this system for 4 months in Ranger School, for 4 months doing Ranger competition as well. So I got a good dose, experienced a good dose of Ranger School. It's almost like people says, how was it compared to being in, being in force? Like, it's just a different mission. It's a different job. You really, some things are similar, techniques, tactics, procedures, TTPs are kind of similar, but yet, different. You know what I mean? In a vast way, and also the military mindset is kind of different. And I will always tell you this: the Rangers, they can hold their own. That's a fact. In fact, when I finished Ranger School, I had an opportunity to go to regiment, to move the regiment, and I unfortunately declined it because they needed combat divers. I'm a combat diver. They needed Halo guys. I'm a Halo,
Right.
So I told the guys, it says, no, thank you very much. I'm gonna stay in Fort Hood. But I had a great enjoyment. The school was extremely difficult because when you look at having to sleep deprivation, compound that, multiply that with the amount of exertion, physical exertion, and compound that or multiply that with the environment, be it hot, be it cold, multiply that, and then the other part is just moving, man, with that freaking heavy, annoying 90-pound freaking rucksack that just, and then God forbid you get the freaking 240 Bravo that weighs 27.6 pounds or 26.7 pounds. If you got to move with that cruiser weapon system plus a 90-pound ruck, you just add yourself in the triple digits of your weight. And wherever you are, it could be in the mountain phase or it could be in the swamp phase. Either way, it is extremely difficult. Even for me as a Force Recon Marine, I had found myself looking at this thing like, holy smoke, never at the moment did I ever think about quitting. But the thing was, it was continuous and continuous and continuous and continuous. And the sleep deprivation, the 2 MREs a day, which you ate them essentially back to back. Like, let's say you eat MRE in 1 hour. Let's say a MRE meal ready to eat at 11 o'clock or 2,300 hours. Or maybe 2,200 hours. And then you get around to, let's say, 2,300 hours and 59. You've had your 2 MREs within a 2-hour period, which is rated 2 hours a day or 2 meals a day. Then you'll run through midnight to 0001 all the way to whatever you got to do, whatever you're doing to get to your next meal. So you essentially get, it's almost like, in my experience, was like every 24 hour, around 23 hours, you would get a meal. So you would run for like 22 hours with no food. Wow. And with no meals. But then you had a little bit of snacks if you had them. If you had crackers, you kick to the side. Or you had some tobacco sauce or whatever. But you'll take that just to give you that. Now, for me, let me tell you something. I'm a wilderness survivalist, right? And every once in a while, I did see a couple of leaves, a couple of twigs, a couple of berries, and I did admit that if as hungry as I was, it was like going back to nature was no big thing. So a lot of us that knew how to eat off rough, foliage, off, nature, we took part of that when we could. Although were we able to, if we had, I could tell you all about eating a leaf. But I can tell you all about eating the bark of a tree. I experienced all that through Ranger School because you just get that hungry to where you just return to nature and just to survive. It was literally like a survival school to me.
That's amazing. And yeah, a couple of weeks ago we interviewed I believe 2 weeks ago you're a fellow Houstonian, Mike Kurth. He was the first guy to call in Black Hawk Down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Ranger, just like you, just stellar, just incredible guy. And so, I don't want the audience to like get my mouth of the South shit talking kind of attitude going on as far as comparing different branches. No, they're very honorable, and different groups very honorable. And as you can hear from John's testimony, uh, operating at a very high level. He was exposed. He's one of the few that has been able to operate, in elite Marine and elite Army uh, uh, systems. And so the thing is, I want the audience to also know that I was mistaken. You were at Fort Hood, so this was uh joining the Army, and you were stationed at Fort Hood, and then you ended up going to Ranger School in between all these different deployments and all of that, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. So that's pretty incredible that you've done all that. And
Yeah. Thank
the
you.
other thing, yeah, I mean, and it educates folks to recognize that this isn't, you know, it's not like you had to do that. Your Force Recon credentials as is, you're like pulling a Brady, you know what I mean? And having
Right.
and having success and not having the bad season, that he's having through now. Um, so I'm gonna switch gears and then ask, all of this combat experiences, and all of these great moves you make in the military, they're making a difference. And then the other side of you is to constructively be in these different entertainment Hollywood productions that kind of mirror warrior life in different ways, whether it's with American Gladiators, this show that people, if you're a Generation Xer, you really know a lot about that show. Or combat missions, which becomes, like I said, a Mark Barnett production that is like pretty much, the pioneering military elite forces show that you have in production even to this day. I mean, Google, I believe there's like a 98 like Google users that are exposed to that show. And that show came out right after like 9/11, that it's out to the public like 2002, right after, pretty much right after 9/11. It has a 98.8 like approval rating from Google,
Mm.
Google viewers that link up to that show. So it's a highly appraised show, or a highly appreciated show. And then you've got Rudy Boesch, who, this legendary Navy SEAL who becomes a star in the show Survivor during like the 90s and stuff like that. And then he's part of the show. You've got all these different people. You've got the elite of the elite, you know, Green Berets, Rangers, Special Forces, SWAT. You got CIA, and then Force Recon. You know. I
Yeah.
mean, can you tell people a little bit? Let's start with American Gladiators, because that's you know
Yeah.
that's a show that people might have some intrigue in, because it's still going on right now,
Really?
Yes, it's still going
Oh,
on. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. It takes on, it morphs into different channels, but
Mhm.
there's still like a high rating for it, and it's
Mhm.
also internationally adapted. But it's still, American Gladiators, and so they have to people who produce that have to pay for that name. That's
Right.
branded. You were part of, television history. You probably don't even know this, but you have your own IMDb entertainment section. It's not filled out, but you should add some things on there,
Okay.
but
Thank you.
but but yeah, someone included, made a IMDb entertainment
Yeah.
entry on you.
Yeah.
So can you say some things about that, how you ended up in these great productions, and what was your thoughts on them?
Yeah, sure, Mike. I certainly can. I'll do my best. Yeah, one of the things I had that came out was about American Gladiators, and one of the things that we all watched while we were in the Marines, and we thought it was exciting. And I said, you know what, an opportunity came available, and I talked to the Marine Corps Force Recon Command. And they gave me, I got approval to do the show, to go out. And then, again, let me back
You
up a
were
little bit.
you were in the military? What?
Yeah, I was still with the unit. Yeah, they gave me a green light to go down there. Just said, "Don't embarrass us," okay? And I said, "Roger that." So that meant I had to win. So anyway, so
You had to go against the gladiators.
oh yeah, yeah,
So
those, yeah,
the gladiators, to let people know, because people in our
yeah,
audience may not know too much about the show. So it's this show is highly rated, especially during the 90s, and just really first show was like 1989, so you were part of when it was really hot, 1995, so you're there prior to the internet. So people are just glued. If they want to see something like this, they have to turn on the TV and watch it. You know what I mean?
yeah. It was a
And
big show. Everyone loved it.
it's a big show. So you're on there, and the gladiators, you're a gladiator contestant. You have to go against these seasoned gladiators who had incredible athletic backgrounds.
Yes.
Um, and then you had the commentators, like my favorite, defensive lineman, because I'm from Florida, so Miami, I don't care about you and Dallas and Dallas Cowboy. I'm a Dolphins fan,
Okay.
to the
Yeah.
end, and Larry Zonka was a commentator.
Yes, he was.
He was a part of that historic Miami undefeated team, Miami Dolphin Don Shula team. People of that level, the famous CBS announcer, I forgot his name, not Pat O'Brien, someone else from CBS Sports,
Mhm.
real big time guy. Um, you had these really top athletic people in sports being a part of American Gladiators. So what can you say some things?
Yeah, well, like I said, one of the things about American Gladiators that's really good, that the day that I went out to audition, there were about 5,000 people that actually showed up for the audition. And let me tell you this, Mike,
Don't say it.
all these guys,
I had the voice.
yeah,
Socrates, Socrates talks about his daemon, so maybe we could get you I don't know. I'll think of some idea where we could put like a chip or something like that, where people could be like, they get instant inspiration and motivation. It's like,
right, yes, yeah,
like this, and then you go swim 2 miles in 30 minutes. So
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah,
What's
and that's great, man. Because like when I look back on that experience, especially starting at the audition phase, you know, these guys that came out, they were very, very fit. You had, professional ball players. You had, a lot of weightlifting people, a lot of people that were in the physical fitness industry,
yes, yes,
uh, and professional athletes, at Olympic athletes that what were going out for the show.
right.
And the thing, I tell you what, man, when you go to the show, I was amazed about how many contestants that were wanting to go try out for the audition. And interesting enough, when I got my opportunity came up to try out for audition, the first thing they had us do is they brought in the first 30 into the studio, and we had no idea what exercises or what testing methods they were going to employ in order for us to get to the next phase of the testing process. We walk in, there's 30 of us, we walk in, and there's these pull-up bars. And that was like, yes. I was like, heck yeah. Now, the pull-up bars being that it's one of the things that we Marines do, part of our physical fitness tests, we conduct pull-ups. Well, the kicker for this portion of the phase of testing was, the first portion was, you had 30 seconds to do 30 pull-ups, and they had to be dead hang, just up, down, just up, down, up, down, and you had your own individual grader. Well, this is the thing. You had 30 seconds, and you can do as many as you were able to do. And I was thinking in my head that I'm going to do 30. I'm thinking 30, right? In 30 seconds. We don't even do that in the Marine Corps, where we have like, what, 2 minutes to do it?
Yeah, 2 minutes to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I'm
smoke a
there.
cigarette. I smoke a cigarette, and
Yeah.
then I get my 20 that way.
I'm kicking them out. I'm putting them out, man. Boom, up, down, just like a freaking rock star, dude. And I get like 28. All right. So there was a cutoff. The cutoff was around, I guess. Well, out of my group of 30, there was only one allowed to go forward to the next phase, and that was me, of course. I said, okay, now you got to go over there, and now you're going to try out and do this. Now you got 4 seconds. Now you got 40-yard dash. You got to run a 40-yard dash in under 5 seconds.
Wait a second. You got 28, and then the guys before you could only get like 20, right, or something.
Yeah, 20, 22, whatever. But they were out of there, dude.
Yeah, wow. So then you go to 40-yard dash.
Yeah, then we transitioned over to the next, testing phase of the training, or the audition was the 40-yard dash. You had to run under 5 seconds. I ran my 40-yard dash in 4.24 seconds. Super fast. And I was able to get to the next phase. So, and the next phase was you had to go to a 60-foot rope climb. You had 6 seconds to get up to the top, to touch the little flag they had up there. And I said, you know what? That's like, I know it was like 40 foot, 60 foot, but either way, I know it was about 6 feet per second that I had to climb. So this is the thing. You had to climb it with no legs. You couldn't do the. You had to do
the Donkey Kong.
Yes, you had to do strong arm all the way, man. I jumped up. I did a vertical about 10 feet, man. Grab a hold of the rope and pulled it to my chest, and just started yanking it all the way until I got to the 6 seconds, and they said time, and you come back down as safely as possible. And I made it through that. And then the last part, I think, was something else we did, but the last part was you had the executive producers were there, and they were handpicking. Once you made it to the 5th or 6th final event, they were handpicking who they wanted on the show, and it was based on your performance all the way up to that point. But the final performance was head-to-head Powerball against your opponent, and you had to make it look good. You had to do something to amaze the directors. And I had this guy who was coming after me, and I did a 360. Dude.
Right, because it's like the fate. Oh, you have to go again. You have to get through.
Yeah,
the other guy. Yeah, that was my favorite event on the show. Okay, so what'd you do?
Well, I faked this guy out. So I went to the right. I got him to commit. Then I just did a 360, turn around, and the whole crowd went, "Woo! Wow! That was awesome." I did like one of those freaking moves, like one of the great running backs of yesterday,
Emmett Smith, Earl Campbell.
Yeah, Emmett Smith's a good example, dude. And it just the whole building just roared, and and the executive director comes up to me and said, "You're on the show," and I'm like, "Yes, I made it. You're on the show." I'm like, "Nice." So I went through that day, and then unfortunately for me, I thought I was going to be on the regular show that make the $25,000, but then I got selected for the.
That's right. These are prized. That you got what?
I was selected for the Armed Forces Championship.
Yeah, and this is pretty amazing because people don't realize. That's why you had all these athletes and all these people, because there is a prize to this.
Yeah, pretty significant prize.
And
decent for one day's work or so.
Yeah, especially back then in the 90s, So
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, and you're doing that, and that in itself, you see, people don't realize what was behind the show. So now you've enlightened us. Now let's get into combat missions, and then I want to talk a little bit about post military, post shows, and wellness. But what what was combat missions like? Again, a Mark Barnett production, major Hollywood production. Right before his Apprentice, and even now he's like tied to Shark Tank and all these other top shows. What was combat missions like?
It was great. I had the experience was out of this world, because you're working and hanging out with some of the most elite warfighting practitioners in the game of special operations community. So it felt great being there, meeting the guys from Delta Force to the CIA to the Navy SEALs to the Green Berets to the Rangers to the SWAT officers that are around the country as well that made it to the show, and also Force Recon. We had a pretty significant role as well. So it was great. But even with that, you were basically the start of it all. There was a show. You put in your let's say call it application, or your photos, and you write up your questionnaire. You send it to them. I actually formed a team up of team members here in Houston that were former Force Recon Marines as well, and we both put our packets in at the same time as a team, and we sent it to Hollywood, and we waited for a couple of weeks until we finally got a call from the executive producers of the show that, hey, you were selected for the show. And I was like, yes. And from that point on, they just gave us
that's some of this going on, right? That voice,
yeah.
Because you didn't have the agent showcasing you to some dude in La Jolla Beach or whatever in Santa Barbara. You just sent the packet in. You had the attitude in there.
Pretty much, yeah. And at the same time, on that back end, you have military advisors that know who they want. You know what? At the end of the day, they select who they want, and it based on, and they check your background very clearly, so you're not one of those guys that are classified as a stolen valor. Yeah. And I mean, and even the special operations community is very, very small. And even people that we hear that were Navy SEALs, we know of them just because we're Force Recon, and there's just a really small, high caliber group of professionals that that doesn't matter what branch we're serving in, we have known of or have heard of each other. So moving forward to the show of the selection, we got the call. I got the call. I flew down to on site. We were given our briefings, and then for that point, we caught a helicopter that was a Huey, an old style Vietnam era Huey, and we flew into Mojave Desert, which again, the whole time we're not aware. We don't get it. We don't have any intel of where we're going. We just know that, hey, get on the helicopter. We're gonna take it to the site. So we fly around the site. Once we get to Mojave Desert, site in Mojave Desert, a secret base in Mojave Desert, we did a 360, a fly around the base, and we're like, oh, that's pretty cool, man. It's got barbed wire, all kinds of stuff, concertina. It's got guard posts and everything. You can see, it was really, really nice looking from the air. So then the helo comes in, it lands, we get off, tells us to get off, we get off and run towards the direction of one of our great legendary Marine Force Recon Marines, Sergeant Major Devers, which is a legend in his own right, man. The guy's been around. He knows Clint Eastwood very well. They're like drinking buddies, what I understand. He's done a lot of military advice. He's military advisor for a lot of these great military movies, classics, and one particularly that I like, that Sergeant Major Devers, and that's just a shout out to him. uh, that he did Los Angeles, I think it was, that alien marine movie.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow.
he was a part of that. So we met him at the site, the filming site of combat missions, and I'm like high fiving him. Hey, Dave, it's good to see you, buddy. And then we get to meet. We're in the hall. We get to meet all these other operators from other branches, and hey, meet and greet. And, I'm Navy SEAL, so and so, Arm, Gray Bird, CIA. I'm like, wow. And hey, Mike, I'm looking at all these guys, and I'm just amazed by, like, just the auras that are emanating from these guys, man. I'm like, dude, these guys are awesome. I'm looking at them like, wow, dude, you're awesome. And they're looking at me like, wow,
Yeah,
dude, you're
yeah,
awesome. And we were like, holy crap. Okay, what are we doing here, man? So we were about to do
It's a
something.
special bromance.
Yeah, it was
It's a
great, man.
tier
They said,
one
hey,
bromance.
yeah, they say that guy over there, he's a Delta Force operator. Like, hey, he's a Delta Force dude. Who is he? Sergeant Major. I'm like, oh man, okay, great. How you doing, man? Me and this other guy over that's on the show as well is a CIA guy for Central Intelligence Agency. So we're like, we all got clearance to do this show. So we got to make it big, so the American people can see, and the people of the world can see exactly who the guys that are behind the scenes are, that make to keep the country free, to keep it safe. And we're just, above average. I say we're ultra type A personalities, first and foremost, ultra type A personalities. We all can lead from the front, but to have that opportunity to showcase our skill sets on a program like Combat Mission was perfect. And when we were there, we really wanted the American audience to see, in the world, to see who is keeping, and I'm taking this paraphrase, one of the words from the CIA teammate, Basil Boz. He says, can see the faces of those that are help keep this country free. For the first time, they've never seen it, because we operate Force Recon. We operation in mostly black face, or not black face, correction. We dark
shadows,
so you can't see our contour, our faces. So most of the time, you don't know the people that are behind keeping this country free, because we have something distorting our contour of our face.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Being a secret soldier, or being, involved in an operation that's pretty sensitive, and they don't see that. But this was an opportunity that we, on combat missions, really enjoyed and we're excited about, because we wanted to say, hey, this is who we are.
And this is what you do. And this isn't easy. This isn't out of like some G.I. Jane or Rambo movie. This is, these are serious skills that, are risky even in training. And you and I both know, and you more, that lives are lost in training as well.
You can say that again, brother. We're the tip of the spear, and a lot of times, even if my unit, we've lost brothers to training. Because, like I said, it goes back to what I said earlier. We max out till we maximum effort. The more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. We are 100% at the tip of the spear in our training, and then when we do the operation, the actual real world operation, it's really not that difficult. In fact, sometimes I say to the guys after we do an actual real world mission, I said, man, that wasn't as bad as I thought, man. No, it wasn't. It was pretty easy, because our training is such at a high level that, hell, nobody can keep up with that, and then this is something we perform day in, day out. So I could never imagine anyone, or let's say an enemy, that could keep up with the qualities or the proficiency of a Force Recon operator. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'm gonna say something here, because me, and a lot of people know me, and I appreciate your friendship, because I'm known as like a hippie, hippie nerd, hippie nerd, and still appreciated by those who really know me, that I'm very patriotic. And even though I have progressive views, I love my country. And I want people to know that when you're speaking like this, or I'm speaking like this, about the defense, it's because we're paying a price, and you more so paying a price, because a lot of people can talk about peace and all this stuff, and about, the criminality, not criminality, but like the challenges of all these military interventions and stuff. But the problem is none of the politicians get criticized. It's like, you at a very high level, you're getting sent. You have no option. This is part of the Constitution that you're bound by law to complete these missions at a very, if you don't succeed in these missions, you're vulnerable to high levels of court martial, to be quite honest. There's an issue people don't understand. There's issues of risk. Someone operating at John's level, of the liability of war crimes. But the thing that people don't understand, that when you take on this type of classification, you're vulnerable in regards to mission failure. If you're a weak link at any time, you're vulnerable for court martial.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother issue that people do not understand. They're in their 3 meals in a cot, comfortable, with their jacuzzis and going to Vegas and all that, and enjoying themselves, and not knowing, like what you're saying, the price being paid by those, skilled. So that show wasn't to show off, American hegemony or anything like that. That show, though there was an entertainment factor,
Yes,
it's basically, along with the entertainment factor, it's an educational piece, and why I consider it as an important piece within veteran readjustment culture is that a show like that can have my son, who's now 12, and in a couple of years, if we continue in this forever war set up by the politicians, not by the military, that's what people in this country do not understand. We do not send the policies. We do not set, missions are set up to accomplish the aims of politicians. So
right.
this is what a lot of American people have to kind of understand. Warriors, especially these, tier 1 guy people like you, like, yeah, I get it. It's important to criticize everything in government, no doubt, but to unjustly scrutinize different people, because they're doing their duty. I think it's important for Americans to see a certain way of life that's outside of going to Vegas and eating that buffet until you become a fat body, and not be concerned about what's happening in other parts in the world.
Yeah,
And some political order has you going to do something that most people cannot do. 1% can do, but
yeah,
most cannot do. And so that's why I talk the way I talk. It's not in any way to glorify violence, not any way to promote Hollywood, as they call it, militainment, military entertainment.
mm,
I believe the combat missions series was just something, here we are, 9/11 happens. We don't know what to do, right? I mean,
right, right.
there's only so much technology can accomplish. Ed Lutwack's book, Techno War,
Mm.
where he wrote that book during the Cold War years, that equipment can only do so much. And I've even classified a certain term within our culture, stop F-35ing it, that you can have like this highly priced plane that's going to fail, and the thing is that American people have to recognize that there's a high price, and it's important for folks to know this other way of life that few can live out.
Right.
And after 9/11, we didn't know that it was going to end up being an operator's war, So
Yeah.
the show that you are part of, is kind of mirroring the reality of Afghanistan, and
The world. Yeah. And like, chime in. It's
global
like,
war on terror.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And this is the thing that we showed on the show. We were attempting to show the audience is that these are the operators, essentially, whether they're active or inactive. But, essentially at the time, some of us were transitioning to other governmental agencies. But the show primarily, the reason why I wanted to be on the show was to showcase, what special operations community capabilities were, or some of the things that we do, like for example, taking back a high valued drug cartel member, or we apprehend on site, or terminate, are rescuing hostages, from a multi-level structure with snipers, basically trying to pin us down, or recovering a nuclear missiles briefcase system, or things that you see how successful we are to be able to do those things flawlessly. But at the same time, there are instances where those missions are ever changing and unfolding, that it could were in the demise of members on the team, if not the whole team, being terminated, because the critical missions that guys like us do. It's always every day it's a do or die.
I think
that try to depict that to the American audience.
And then the thing about it is, the show for me, and I'm glad you went into the details, because I forgot about all those details. The other part is that it fills in what Tom Clancy and Dick Marcinko. Now, Dick Marcinko's coming in from a different perspective, because there's fiction. He's writing fiction, but at the same time, he did create SEAL Team 6. But at the same time, your average American reader isn't going to be too familiar with the operations he's talking about in those Rogue Warrior books, right? And then
Right.
Tom Clancy is not even a veteran, I don't think, and he's writing all these books on special operations, and so there's a whole nother rabbit hole there. And so you've got Dick Marcinko, who he's criticized, but I get what he was talking about, and we all know, he just got caught. There's a lot of commanders, and we saw it, in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's all kinds of different slush funds. I mean, it just doesn't happen in the military. It happens in all parts of large government. I mean, we're a lot better than other countries. I'm not condoning it, but we're a lot better than other countries where people basically say, "Hey, I'm going to have your daughter. I'm going to take your daughter. Your daughter's a virgin, whatever. I want her. And not only that, my son's going to marry her. You know what I mean? And that's what your payment is going to be. And by the way, and I'm going to take this from you. Our level of corruption is a lot different, and yet Marcinko is completely demonized for the rest of his life. At the same time, he organized an incredible project, SEAL Team 6. And again,
Yes.
I'm not glorifying it. I'm just pointing out certain realities, and that show, Combat Missions, gives. And the reason why I say that is that you can YouTube the show and find out what we're talking about, and
Yes.
you can get into some of the things John's talking about. Yes, on this episode, I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm having a conversation with an elite warrior. I am not pretending that I was in his shoes or close to his shoes. I am talking with him and bringing out important information with him so that folks can do their own research and get deeper into understanding his life in elite forces.
Good deal. Good. Well said. Well said, Mike. Well said. Like I said, I was very happy, honored to be on the show, and to really showcase, to represent the Force Recon community, recon community, the Marine Corps as a whole. And, you know, and it really turned out very, very well, I think. But unfortunately, it did happen at a time where 9/11 did take place. And, you know, after that point, you know, in time that the entire world was in shock. So, you know, it didn't get, combat missions did not get as many views as we thought. But at the same time, and the back in out of sight, in the, you know, the back rooms of discussion, the Pentagon had a lot to say about the show. In fact, we had to get the approval from the Pentagon before this show ever had a chance. And they went through a lot of paperwork, red tape, to get it to the point where they could see the operators. In fact, some of the operators, even though we were declassified, some of the operations we were declassed, or, you know, civilians are doing other things in our lives and had opportunity to showcase their skills, because we never really, once you're trained warrior fighting practitioner, you're trained for life. But some of the guys were a little concerned about their, you know, things that they were a part of, associated with while they were in the military or government, that would come back to hunt them, and may even have an adverse impact on their lives moving forward with things they've done overseas in other areas in other countries, you know. And we were all concerned about that, because, you know, being an operator, you know, I call it a secret soldier or secret, you know, military elite. Yeah, we're all concerned about it. We love our country. We love each other, and we're willing to lay our lives down for our brothers and our sisters. And you know, it was a call that we take very, very seriously. And if it required me to lose my life to keep my country free, well, so be it. I will be proud to lay my life down for my countrymen, because that's just the kind of people we are. That's the kind of guys we are. Operating as a whole. And I'm very privileged to be on the show, and I'm sure the other operators that were there, you know, some that were on the show, unfortunately, after the show, years later down the road, they were serving overseas again, and unfortunately lost their lives in combat. Wow. You know, some in the very horrific ways, but then again, that shows the caliber of warfighting practitioners we are. We love our country, and we're willing to go back. It's just, give me a call.
Yeah, you knew the guy who PBS did a documentary on Frontline regarding his life as a contractor. I guess he was a Navy SEAL, well-known Navy SEAL. What was his name?
Scott. First name Scott Helveston. Yeah, Navy SEAL.
And he died he was killed in Fallujah. Okay. Yeah.
In 2004, he was a Blackwater USA contractor. In fact, during that time, I was also going through the process of being boarded to as a contractor myself with the Blackwater USA program. And it wasn't until I received a call from a good friend of mine, a Navy Green Beret, that informed me of Scott's death. And at which time, when I saw that, I was like, okay, let's put a hold on this until let's see what's going on with this thing with Scott. And it turns out that it was confirmed that he did die over in Fallujah.
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't realize, and I know we spoke about the wellness side, and we'll do that. We'll have a part 2 where we're just gonna have the whole show focus on wellness. But quickly, before you give last words and stuff, his death, people don't understand the sad life of contractors, that you may make a lot on the front end, but there's no insurance. There's no, what I mean? Really, like if you have like a injury, or if you die, his family was stuck like Chuck, afterwards. You could only survive on so much of that front end money, and then for the rest of your life, a wife and children lost a father, in reality, and a husband. And so I believe you were wise to question, but to just stand by. And I just want to, give you a lot of credit for your journey. And like I said, folks, we're going to have another show that's going to focus on wellness, on post-military life wellness, because, John is, doing all this, snake eating and all that. That's a term called the snake eaters, if you're a special operator, but at the same time, he's also, if you check him out, on Facebook and stuff, he's got a beautiful house. He's into gardening, he's into planting, he's into beautiful boat, beautiful children, just an incredible life post-military. You're deeply spiritual. I
Yes.
want to have a whole episode on that. So a part 2. So I know we've talked about it, and so I'm gonna slate that, just because I know I started, a little bit, a little late, and Cindy, I know on the show I can say that because she's very forgiving. But yeah, we've extended it, and it's well worth it to have you on. And can you give us some last words? Anything that I didn't cover, or anything that I interrupted, and that you noticed that you wanted to kind of like mention to folks before we end, and also how they can know more about you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mike. I do my best shot. Hold on for a second. Julie, could you please close the door?
You can't hear, so it's okay.
Okay, you can? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you're super locked in. People don't understand. John Winn is one of the most squared away people in this world, and maybe I got to have him in my apartment to square away. I got this all clouded out, but just give me ideas about my pad. But this guy is so squared away. So he was concerned about the noise factor and everything. So that's why he was like signaling. But so just let anything last words, and also how people can check out your beautiful boat, and then we're going to go on our next our future episode on all
All
that.
right. Yeah, cool. No problem, Mike. I do my best. All right. I like to, want to say a couple final words to the audience in my summary of the meeting podcast. And Mike, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on your show. And I think what you're doing is absolutely paramount, is absolutely important and needed for the veterans, and alike for those that are the members of the veterans, the family members, as well as the audience as a whole. And my takeaways for me is being a warfighting combat practitioner, and also being a FLAG, which is an acronym that I made up called Former Legendary Action Guy, is that this is what we do. We do it because this is something we love to do. We do it because we love our country, first and foremost. And at the same time, it's exciting because being a special operations a member, you get to do things and go places that most people will never do. And it's very, very true. It's a very, very collective group of individuals that are, as I classify, are ultra type A personalities that really do have or possess a conviction of love of country, of the red, white, and blue, and our brothers to the left and brothers to the right. As we say, never above you, never below you, always beside you. And that's important. Even today, after my life, as my post life as a retiree, from working for multiple branches of the Department of Defense, and also extending that into the Department of Justice, it was an honor. And that it's an honor that I will always, when I lay my head back at night and look at the ceiling of my, where I am, I'm always thinking about my brothers and sisters in uniform, the ones that are retired, as well as the ones that are currently active and protecting us today. We sleep and enjoy our homes and our freedom we live off the backs of those mighty men and women who serve in our uniform, our military today. We currently have 1.4 million active duty military personnel that are keeping our freedom free, keeping us free, keeping us from having to be in situations where that are happening in other countries. So I honor you, Mike, for this great podcast program. I give honors to all the veterans, retired, disabled veterans, the current veterans, the future, the current servicemen and women who are serving uniform here and abroad. And I give honor and respect and love to all the civilians, all the American people, all the people in the world, because there's one thing I learned about war. As the etymology of the word war is what we call an essential breakdown in the communications of our civilization. And it becomes a very personal thing to me when you see the faces of those fighting for our country and knowing that some will come back and knowing that some will not. That's our business. And it's unfortunate, but every time I experience downrange experiences, I always try to do the best I can as an NCO to bring my soldiers, bring my Marines back so they can be back with their families. And that's the key, is we go there because we love our countrymen and our families, and we want to come back to our families the same way we left them. And I hope that the system and the government continues to support us, because it's definitely needed. Even though I retired, after 22 years, and I've been retired for 7 years now, I'm still dealing with memories that I attempt to compartmentalize of my experiences in downrange combat. But hey, Mike, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I will conclude at this time. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Thank you very much. And do I have permission to let the people know about your gardening through Facebook? Right? They can find some of those great flowers. Yeah, John Winn Bey, the original, the legend. We're gonna sign off, but we're gonna have him again to talk about some of this wellness, this extension of veteran life. Also, our Veterans Day special, we're going to have a panel. We had John on the 9/11 panel discussion, and before Veterans Day, we're gonna blast another panel, and we're going to be inviting him again. So he's a regular. He's part of the Coming Home Well family. So thanks for joining us. This is a project sponsored by Coming Home Well, Veteran, etc. Your host, Mike Kim. We're here to learn more about veteran culture and also how that impacts on the readjustment of not just the warrior, but the warrior and the warrior's family and his or her loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Blessings.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out ComingHomeWell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.